For just a split second, I thought this was Seek and Destroy.
Right?
I was like, what? We did this bit already.
Right.
So, dudes, episode 4 of Discography Discussion.
Metal.
What's going on, Dan?
Well, the Space Dust is really good.
Newcastle, that's where it's at.
Josh is over here behind me.
Yo.
Sky's on the floor, and I've got Newcastle as well.
Good stuff.
So, Dan, tell me about Space Dust, why don't you?
Well, Space Dust is a high-gravity IPA made by a company called Elysian. Has a beautiful cover of a hop in space. You heard that right. And it is vomiting dust. So I assume basically what I'm drinking is space hop dust or space hop vomit. But maybe they just changed the word to dust so that people would actually buy it. Would have made no difference to me, but...
Vomit sounds cooler, actually.
It really does.
Sounds more metal.
Yeah, you think beer, vomit, right?
That's right. They go hand in hand.
Right. So, yeah, Space Dust is really good. Don't drink more than like 2 of them.
He knows from experience.
Trust me.
So, who are we talking about this week?
Slayer.
Let me ask you that again, just to see if we can get through to our audience and Josh as well. Who are we listening to this week?
Slayer.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, because it's Slayer.
Because it's Slayer and they slay things.
I wish I could do the high-pitched sound in every
Right
song
on.
from him.
I know.
That'd be the intro.
I almost tried it and then I was like, no.
Yeah, no, I don't want to hurt myself or
Too
others
much.
out there.
Before we get going on that, we've been places this week. We've done things. We've had our podcast accessible in other areas.
Yeah. So, I mean, before you had to kind of go to our page or Google it whenever Google got around to actually acknowledging that we exist.
Thank you, Google.
Thanks, Google, so much.
Thank you, Google.
So, we also are now available to listen to on Google Play. So, if you are listening on an Android device, we are really thankful for that. And also, though, if you're an iPhone user or an iOS user or a Mac Air Pad Pro phone watch thing, you can do that too. Just through the iTunes store, you can find our podcast. And the coolest thing is there's this like little cylinder that Joe has upstairs, and it talks to him. It's called Alexa, and it's connected to Amazon. It's like
It's the Amazon Echo. Dude.
Is it an Amazon woman that you speak to through this magic cylinder? That's
well, her
upstairs?
name is Alexa, and she either does what I say or tells me that she doesn't know how.
Gotcha. So we discovered that one of the cool things that we can ask Alexa to do is we can ask her to listen to Discography Discussion. So
that's right, because we are on TuneIn Radio
exactly
as well as iTunes and Google Play.
So all you have to do is go up to Alexa and say, Alexa, play Discography Discussion.
And she will.
And I'd like to apologize because if you're listening to this too loudly, that's what's actually happening. So now you're doubling up.
So what I need everybody to do is go to your friend's house and just as you're leaving, tell Alexa to play the latest episode of Discography Discussion.
There you go.
And walk out the door.
So,
see you, Grandma.
What is this?
Oh, Lord.
That bearded man is cursing.
Oh, dear.
They don't know I have a beard.
Who said it was you?
Awkward.
Right. True story. Anyway.
So we're going to talk about Slayer this week.
We're going to talk about some Slayer.
Slay it.
Let's slay it.
Go ahead, Dan. Tell me about Slayer.
So Slayer, I hadn't heard Slayer for a long time. My start with metal was, as I talk about a lot, was like in Christian metal. So a lot of the people that would be recommending me to listen to bands were not recommending me to listen to Slayer. And there's a reason for that. Slayer is, they're extreme. Very extreme. At least for the 80s, they were very extreme. Slayer plays thrash metal, and they don't have really nice lyrics, and they sound very angry constantly.
They were very angry.
They were, and probably still are. I'm not entirely certain.
Nah, they've chilled some.
Yeah, how they're feeling personally.
Yeah.
Right this second, but Slayer was angry. They had very angry lyrics. They were very anti-religious, so to speak, and they shocked people. Slayer has kind of had its ups and downs. Slayer's kind of a hard band to talk about too because they're one of the very few bands out there that puts out a very consistent product.
They have a formula. They use it. They stick to it. It works for them. They've done it for 35 plus years already.
Right.
I would go as far as to say that, with apologies to the other members of the Big Four, Slayer might be the definitive thrash band when it comes to the style and the way it's presented.
Absolutely.
You get exactly what you're expecting to get when you say, I'm going to listen to thrash.
Oh, I agree 100%. They're the only one who stays true to those roots, as opposed to the other three who have, if we discuss Metallica, I mean, obviously they've changed their styles over the years. Megadeth, they went through phases where they changed. And Anthrax, I'm not personally a big Anthrax fan, but I know that they've, they're a different style.
They've changed it up quite a bit. I was watching
different lineups and.
Yeah, I was watching like a Headbangers Ball or something real late at night the other night.
Love Headbangers Ball.
And Anthrax.
If anybody guys remember that.
Yeah, they had an Anthrax
Dude, I was watching
music
some
video
retro Headbangers Ball the other day.
Yeah, well, that's what I was watching too. It must have been retro because there was an Anthrax video on there. And they would almost seem like they were just like up there rapping or something. I really didn't know what to say.
Well, Anthrax has always been one of those groups that you can tell where they came from because, they're very much a let's have fun band. That started as a thrash band.
Yep.
So
pretty much.
We're a thrash band, but we like rap, so we're going to do a rap song because why not?
Right.
Whereas with Slayer, you're going to get mind-blowing speed. You're going to get thrashy, yelled vocals.
Insane vocals at times.
You're going to get
insane.
You're going to get what some people would call repetitive, but I call them thrash drums.
Right, yeah.
And
drums
consistent.
And over the top, screechy guitar solos.
Yeah, Cat Stranglers.
Cat Strangling.
Cat Stranglers.
I love Kerry King, but yeah, boy, his
Do
solos.
we get to make that the first official discography discussion term? This is a cat strangler.
Oh,
I guess so. I guess we can incorporate that.
I'll take that.
The term has been coined.
And yes, we're going to search your blogs, and if you're using it, you have to pay me like
exactly
$27.98.
I like it. Let's do it.
Fair enough. And
Slayer to me was always that group. It's really hard to shuffle. Like, I can't just sit down and listen to all the Slayer in my library. I can't just say, hit shuffle on Slayer and be happy because, good thrash albums, regardless of the artist, are best consumed whole. You get the tone, you get the feeling, you get the mood that the band is trying to set. And if you try to mix that, it usually doesn't work. And even though I would hold Slayer very high, I really don't enjoy listening to old Slayer and new Slayer. I pick an album that I want to listen to and I say, I'm going to listen to Rain and Blood today. I'm going to listen to the newest record. Like, I've been listening to a lot of Repentless, and I've been enjoying it. I know it's the newest one they've got, but
it's not bad. It's not bad. Like Dan and I talked on the way over here, it's almost like they're trying to revert back with that sound
to the old sound.
Yeah, to the old sound. And you can hear it in the vocals on the riffs for sure. I agree with you on listening to. You can't listen to a Slayer on a shuffle. You definitely have to pick an album and go with it.
Yeah, and the albums aren't terribly long either.
No,
you're not making an hour-long commitment or anything.
You basically got to start, strap in, and hold on for your life, and then take your journey through the ride.
Pretty much.
So, what's your favorite Slayer record, Josh?
Oh, Rain and Blood for me, for sure.
All right, we agree on that. Dan?
I knew you were going to ask me this damn question.
I like South of Heaven.
And I've been,
I like South of Heaven. Dan and I.
All right,
clearly we like all the Slayer albums, but
I'm going to take a guess. Do you mind?
You can guess.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. This is 21 years of knowing this man. Seasons in the Abyss.
Yep.
Yeah, you got me.
Boom!
I would have guessed that too.
Yep.
That's right.
Well, because I was disappointed with South of Heaven, which we get into a little bit later, but Seasons of the Abyss was kind of like, oh, okay, that was just like a one-off.
Yep.
Cool.
I like Seasons. The actual
I was
title
way
song.
wrong.
Well, the title song.
So you want to start at the top with Show No Mercy?
Show No Mercy, 1983.
3, yeah.
Yep. Okay. I wasn't even alive yet.
But you still enjoyed it.
I still enjoyed it.
Damn right. Dan was at the first show.
I was, absolutely. After I asked my dad, were you at a Slayer show?
What?
What, circa 1982, right? They're probably playing these songs for years before they released the album.
Well, this was the early 80s. This is what people consider the golden age of thrash.
Sure.
This is when you got Metallica. This is when you got Megadeth. This is when you got Anthrax.
It's when you got Slayer. Yeah. So Slayer was not like the super badass band that they were later on this record. Show No Mercy is still a crazy, insane thrash metal album. I mean, I'm not going to debate whether or not it's thrash. Or, it's absolutely.
You really can't debate that any Slayer isn't thrash.
Oh, we can and we will.
Oh, all right.
I'm not going to debate genres too much, but so Show No Mercy was kind of like a thrash album that was still kind of coming off the roots of heavy metal. Like, think old Metallica, not as melodic, but think old Metallica in the sense that those records were thrash metal records, but they were they had kind of that old school production quality to them, to where they sounded like
Someone's
almost
garage.
like no, I mean not even that. I mean, because this one actually sounds Show No Mercy sounds actually a little produced to me. It sounds like a hair metal album.
It is very clean.
Yeah, like those are the people that they were with, were hair metal, producers.
Well, that was the scene that the thrash metal bands were around, unfortunately, in San Francisco and in LA at the time.
And typically at that time, any group that got a record contract or any type of record label recognition, they spent money on the studio.
Yep.
Right.
Because they wanted to create the prettiest product they could to hopefully sell it.
Right.
It just happened to be that it was Slayer.
Well, so Show No Mercy was, I wouldn't say as heavy as their later stuff was. Show No Mercy was more about speed, I think, than it was about heaviness. It's definitely more about atmosphere than technicality. It's kind of more of like, it has more of a classic heavy metal sound to it.
Aggression to it.
Yeah. Like, it's
I mean, the songs with Die by the Sword on there was,
Face the Slayer.
That's right. I know. It kind of goes along the lines of like a Kill 'Em All kind of sound. Like,
yeah. One of my favorite songs on that record is The Antichrist. It's
which people
cheesy.
try to get banned, by the way, which kills me because it's not how those guys view that at all. Like, that's not their persona, that they believe in that stuff whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. It's with Slayer, you definitely get more of a religion's not real vibe than yes, we believe it, and I actually am the Antichrist. Well,
that's always been Kerry King. I think I read an interview with him once where he said that God was an invention by man who couldn't handle the real world on their own.
Right.
So, I mean, you get exactly what you get as far as the mindset goes.
Right. I mean, I disagree, but yeah, I get it.
Right. I mean, I'm not asking you to agree with it.
Well, no, but I get it though. Like that's been the whole Slayer shtick. Is that none of it is actually real. So they use this imagery and these lyrics. But I think Show No Mercy had a lot of really cheesy lyrics.
Black magic.
Yeah, lots of black
classic,
magic.
That song, I like it, but yeah, that's the classic metal. Cheesy, you know.
We're actually listening to my favorite on this record, which is Die by the Sword.
Oh, yeah, dude. Yeah. The solos actually on this record are a little bit more
traditional.
They're more traditional, yeah. They're more like what you'd hear on other bands of the same ilk.
Like a real band, not something you're listening to on your way to hell.
Right. No Cat Stranglers.
Exactly.
Yes. But yeah, so I mean, Show No Mercy was a really good record. I don't think that it did a whole lot to differentiate Slayer from other bands at the time. Still cool. I mean, like, you go to the store, you buy it, you take it home, you listen to it, you're going to like it, you're going to enjoy it.
If you like Slayer, if you like thrash metal, if you like heavy guitars, you're going to like this record.
Well, I know a lot of people that like Slayer that just don't like the first album.
Why?
Because it's just not... Because it's not Rain and Blood.
It's like Slayer unpolished to these people.
It is, and like, I mean, you look in the back of the band pictures and stuff, and they're like holding upside down crosses, and they have like makeup and stuff on. It's just like so anti-Slayer. Yeah, like it doesn't seem like something Slayer would do. Like,
that's not my Slayer.
Right? Yeah, not my Slayer.
Hashtag.
Oh man, discography discussion is fake news.
That's right. This is going to be out there in the news tomorrow.
For sure.
Absolutely.
We're going to hear from Kerry King's lawyer.
I hope so.
I want to use the term cat
strangler.
Cat strangler solo.
Dan, can you have a conversation with Kerry King's lawyer? And Josh, can you be Kerry King's lawyer, only you are Lars Ulrich?
No, we're not doing it.
Oh, come on.
We've noticed that you've been using some of my material. And you have to pay us like a truckload of money.
Okay, but you have to pay me for putting Cat Strangler in paper. I invented Cat Strangler.
Yeah, you have to talk to my lawyer on that one.
But you're supposed to be the lawyer.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
All right, no more skits on discography discussion. Yikes!
But it's fun if it's Lars.
Sure, it is. Everything's fun with Lars.
I know.
I don't mean you can't talk in the Lars voice, sometimes.
I'll do a whole podcast as Lars one time.
Yeah. Lonely Lars.
Hey guys. Hey, how's everybody doing tonight?
All right,
we're talking about Slayer.
Hell Awaits. That's the next album.
Hell Awaits. Oh my goodness. If there's one word I can use to describe Hell Awaits, it is balls. They literally instantly transformed out of the Show No Mercy Slayer into the Slayer we all know now. In one album.
Do you guys, to me, when I listen to this album, the first thing I thought of is Merciful Fate. Do you guys hear the influence on that?
I can hear it.
I didn't know that. Like, I think of
certainly not in the vocals, but yeah.
No, like just the style of music. And Jeff Hanneman in interviews before he passed away had mentioned that they were a huge influence on him in this album. And I can hear it now going back and listening to it. I wouldn't have guessed that before, but yeah, I can see Merciful Fate in here for sure. And that's another band that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Hell Awaits.
The songs are longer, more progressive,
and it's just so much heavier than Show No Mercy was, and it kind of blows my mind because I don't see bands just instantly change like that.
No, you see like a progression a little bit,
Right. I mean, I've seen
almost
it
like
happen.
night and day style.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it happen when like every member of the band changes out or something, but for the most part,
I get the feeling listening to this that you've got a band that put out an album and then said, now we're going to put out the album we want. And, how many times have you heard a band that the album that you get, usually the first one, but the album that you get is very clean, it's very produced, and then you go see them live and you say, well, it's not as good as the album, or it's not as technical, or the album was really clean compared to that. And I get that impression with Slayer that, you listen to Hell Awaits and you think this is the same band unhinged.
Right.
And I hear what later Rick Rubin was very dialed
in. We were going
in.
to get in this podcast before the word Rick Rubin started flying around.
Well, you only had one more album anyway.
He was to say he was a big influence for.
He's not here yet, though, man. Offsides, false start.
How do I say?
Come on.
You can tell what he heard in this band and said, I can make them something.
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, I clearly, and I believe it is documented too that Rick Rubin heard Hell Awaits and was like, I can make this band into something really great. Yeah.
Brian Slago found them, was like, man, these guys are great. We got to get them seen.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, yeah, that's a rough, uncut Slayer. And then Rick Rubin's like, I can take this band to a whole nother level. And that's his vision for him.
Yeah, he absolutely
And they went along with it. Yeah, I mean, you can't argue it. I mean, whether you like it or not.
There's not a whole lot notable about Hell Awaits. I mean, it's a great record on its own, but it's kind of the record that came out before Rain and Blood, so it
gets lost in the shuffle.
It is very significant in establishing the band's more modern sound. But as far as an album goes, it doesn't have the most memorable songs because I think at this point we're focusing on aggression. We're focusing on heaviness.
Yeah,
and
if I
when
could
you do
pick
that,
one,
you're not writing
Kill
songs at that point. You're just trying to blast out as fast and hard as you can.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the song content is not anything that's going to wow you. It's not anything that's going to be controversial or topical or.
There's a song on there called Necrophiliac, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's very metal, Dan.
But I mean, we've all been there, right? So
at least once.
Just got weird and awesome. Anyway,
I mean, my D&D character was
right.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, isn't that that's an interesting factoid about Slayer is that I believe the band was called Dragon Slayer.
Yep,
originally.
That was their original name that they come up with.
And weren't a lot of their lyrics or especially on the first album based on the stuff that happened in their D&D campaigns?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's hilarious.
Which why can't we do that now?
Right, yeah.
That would be a hit today.
Well, yeah, especially since being a nerd is awesome now.
It has been for quite some time now.
Yeah, pretty much since I was in high school.
One thing that I'd like to point out now, because it'll be very relevant later, and Josh, you might notice this about Kerry King and Jeff Hanneman's guitar tone. Big time mids.
Oh, yeah.
The thing that every young guitarist should learn about your tone, if you play metal, turn the mids up. Don't turn them down.
Yep.
because that's where, when you turn the mids down, all you've got is bass and high, and that's where the drums and the bass guitar live. So if you want me to hear you without cranking it up and blowing out the mix, turn the mids up. Slayer's been doing it since the 80s.
Yep.
And they've always had a mid-heavy sound, and you can hear every note they play.
Well, yeah. I mean, Rain and Blood doesn't even sound like an 80s record.
No.
It sounds way more modern, I think, than it's given credit for. And it's interesting to me because Slayer, I've heard because thrash kind of came back in like after 2010, like in a lot of especially in our local scene here in St. Louis, tons of thrash bands, and they're playing more of like a punk thrash, but I listen to some of the stuff they're putting out, and it doesn't sound really all that different than this. And it's crazy to me that this record came out so long ago because it still sounds new.
1986. Put that in perspective.
I mean, it maybe doesn't sound like 2017 new, but it certainly.
But still, you
hand it to me and say, this is a new band by someone I haven't heard of, and I'm like, wow, that sounds really cool.
Guess the year this album came out.
Yeah.
2012? Nope.
That's what I was thinking. Or 2002 or something. Yeah, it's crazy. Rain and Blood, I mean, it's everyone's favorite Slayer album, just about, and with good reason. It's when Slayer delivered the perfect hamburger, so to speak. They just, this is where everything that they had, the technicality, the speed, the aggression, and the control, all of it accumulated into this album.
And it's mixed well, too.
Oh, yeah, it's so mixed well.
The production value on it's phenomenal.
By he who shall not be named.
We already said his name.
Call him R&R.
R&R, yep.
All right, we coined another term.
Right?
Ka-ching!
These are not the only Rick Rubin albums we're going to ever talk about.
You're supposed to say R&R. Anyway. I mean, what do you want to say about Slayer?
I reject your rules.
It's Rain and Blood.
It's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, if you've never heard Rain and Blood, first of all, I don't even know why you're listening to this. And second of all, you need to go listen to Rain and Blood.
Angel of Death.
Yeah, Angel of Death just blasts out of the gate, and you know everything that you need to know about that record within the first 38 seconds. It's a good and a bad thing.
Why is it a bad thing?
Well, it's a bad thing because the problem I have with Slayer as a whole is a lack of dynamics. You kind of get the same thing from beginning to end. Don't get me wrong, though. I like that sound. I have no problem getting only that from the beginning to the end once, maybe twice a day.
I think that's what makes them unique, though, is there are so little bands who could do that for such a prolonged time.
No, it's true, yeah. I mean, what they did wasn't bad. In my own personal music experience, though, I like to be surprised by what I hear. So you get 2 or 3 songs into a Slayer album.
It's going to be the same thing.
There's almost no reason to continue.
I know, I understand. I respect what you're saying.
That's kind of what I was getting at earlier about as far as Slayer goes. They're one of those bands. I can't say I want to listen to Slayer. I can say I want to listen to Metallica.
Right.
And I'm a super fan, so that's kind of cheating. But you can say you want to listen to Zayo and just shuffle Zayo. And whenever you get, you're going to be happy. Slayer, I've got to pick an album.
Right.
And it's not difficult. I've been doing it all week. Yeah, I'm going to listen to this album today.
Yeah.
And by the time I'm done, I'm glad I listened to it. I'm entertained. I'm happy. I'm a thrash fan, so I'm getting everything I want. But I don't feel like I retain anything from it.
Right.
So it's one of those... It's kind of like a fast food cheeseburger. I really want to eat it, and when I ate it, I'm glad. Right. But what do I remember about it?
Yeah,
I remember
you're not thinking about it now. Yeah,
right. I think it was a Jack in the Box cheeseburger. The last time I ate Jack in the Box cheeseburger, I was happy, and I'm gonna eat it again.
Right.
Now, if a Jack in the Box taco, that's completely different.
I mean, come on.
You go for that right now.
Get a case of those. Anyway,
one thing I think we do need to talk about though is this the first time that Slayer has created what you would consider a signature riff? Rain and Blood.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I was telling Josh on the way over here, I was like, man, my wrist hurts just listening to this.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think this is probably where they polished that signature sound where they were known for. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have some pretty notable riffs from this album.
Well, I think Rain and Blood was so
And the
iconic.
Song, oh yeah.
And I think Rain and Blood was so iconic that I think that's the reason why there are elements of Rain and Blood in pretty much every other Slayer album that's come out after that. Because they remember that was the big paycheck. That was you guys have won the lottery, you're a huge band now.
This is your bread and butter, stick to it.
Right. Which is actually really cool if you think about it, because and I don't know a whole lot about what was going on behind the scenes with Slayer at that time, but it is strange to hear the record label not, they're not trying to get him to put out, the Black Album. They're not trying to get him to put out more commercial music, which I think kind of leads us into South of Heaven.
I think a little bit of that would be Kerry King. Because he's always kind of had control.
What? He's kind of
Kerry like the King doesn't, of the group.
Doesn't confirm? Doesn't conform? What? He's not a conformist?
He's the spokesperson
for
the group.
And welcome to South of Heaven.
See, I like this album too.
Right.
Particularly this song.
Sometime within the last 2 weeks or so, I've sent Josh a text message being like, man, South of Heaven is so weak, well,
it depends on what order you listen to it. Like
I've been listening to pretty much like Show No Mercy, Rain and Blood, and Hell Awaits. It's all I was listening to for the first couple, when I was first starting to prep up for it. And so when I heard, whenever I heard South of Heaven, I was like, first of all, why is it going so slow?
Well, that's the thing. There's totally different tempo changes in this album.
Completely different. But after a while, I started liking it because I'm just a sucker for dynamics, man. I like hearing Slayer doing something different. Vocally, musically, but still very Slayer. If you just listen to those lyrics, it's just so, it's just so gruesome. It's like Halloween every day for these guys,
Is this the first time that Slayer's backed off on a record?
Oh, for sure. People complain about Show No Mercy not being as heavy as the other records, but that was also their debut. You can't really say they slowed down on that one.
I wouldn't call it a slowdown. I would think it's just, I don't know. I guess if we're going to compare it to, it would be like this would be their version of like Master of Puppets. This is the first sound where you enter more melodic, more intricacies into the solos, into riffs, the lyrics, different dynamics.
Catchiness.
Yeah, it was more of a, I don't want to say poppy, but more of a catchy riff there. It's more of like that entertainment thing, that one hook from a song that you're going to remember through the whole process, the whole album you listen to it. See, I think that's the best song on the album.
I feel like it's a repetitive thing to say, and this is South of Heaven, the title track. It's a very repetitive thing to say about Slayer, but it applies. Like, what do you want me to say? It's Slayer.
Right. It's Slayer, but it's not your mama's Slayer either at that point. Like, this has changed things now. They've changed things up. You have slower pace. You have more discernible vocals, which I appreciated actually, because it can sometimes be really hard to follow. What horrible, despicable thing is being sung about, and so it was. I always wanted to hear more about that, and on South of Heaven, I get that. The interesting thing about South of Heaven also is that it is not so much like evil sounding lyrics. It's a little bit more like socially conscious type stuff.
Sure, they tackle more actual topics and more actual issues, more so than just, hey, Satan,
black magic,
voodoo,
All right, guys, roll a 20. Yeah,
that's
it's
right.
like it's more it's more like, okay, this is the real world we live in, and it's messed up too, and we're Slayer, and we don't ever pass up talking about something that's messed up.
That's right.
So this record really grew on me, and I never really had a favorite song so much.
War Ensemble.
Yeah.
Mandatory Suicide.
Well, yeah, for the next one, but yeah. So I think when I heard Seasons in the Abyss, I think that was kind of my sweet spot.
Well, and I think the thing for this album that makes it different is this is the first album with Rick Rubin they did on his own label. Because on the last album, I forget what label they were with, but Rick Rubin pretty much left that label, started his own with somebody, and Slayer did this album with them on his new label.
Right, this guy prints us money.
Yeah, so I mean, so you can probably tell a difference in a lot of stuff and a lot of free range to be able to write. Listen to the lyrics. I mean, the last album, there was stuff that they wouldn't even want them to release for, obvious reasons.
Right.
And even before that.
It blows my mind that this came out in 1990 and still sounded the way that it did.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the only way that it would get away with that would be having a producer or a record distributor like Rick Rubin, who that's what he was going for. But
right.
You're not going to hear this on Universal or any big album at this time.
No, all of your majors are going to be like, you need to start singing.
Yep. Lighten it up.
We need at least one ballad song about your girlfriend or something on here.
Yeah.
Because people aren't going to buy it. And so Slayer's just like, well, first of all, you know what band we are, right?
Yep.
At this point, I mean, like, we did a more commercial album. It's called South of Heaven. Have you heard it?
That's right. South of Heaven was slow. It's a ballad.
Right. It's a ballad to death.
This is the least scary artwork album for this album, too.
And this is also the last album that included Dave Lombardo for a while.
Yep.
Yeah,
he would leave, and I forget why, but he'd be gone for a few albums, and he eventually ended up coming back. I think 2 or 3 albums.
Kind of like the buddy of Slayer, right?
Oh, boy.
He pops in when he's needed.
So this is your favorite album, Dan. Why?
So, hypocritical statement incoming.
I
liked it because it sounded like a mix of South of Heaven and Rain and Blood. Because it clearly does. Because all the good stuff about South of Heaven, more distinguishable vocals, better production quality, songs that you actually remember that have hooks. Seasons of the Abyss says all of that. Except it's in one album. I don't have to go listen to Rain and Blood to get speed. I don't have to go listen to South of Heaven in order to get memorable songs. So, like, I mean, having it all on one album like that was just kind of like my cupcake. It had the cake and the icing all in one little cup.
That's the answer I'd expect from a lead singer.
What are we going to do with him? Seriously.
Go figure.
You get what you pay for. It's Slayer. I'm repeating myself again, but it's fast. It's got balls. It's got memorable riffs too, man.
Oh, it does.
I mean, it's not that Rain and Blood wasn't memorable, but it's only memorable because I've listened to it like 400 times. Like,
maybe you should do it 401.
Yeah, clearly that's where I've gone wrong here.
You're gonna hear us say a lot. Yeah, the Slayer. It's what are you gonna say? It's Slayer. Like,
right.
This isn't gonna be a podcast that's gonna be like life altering discussions. It's pretty simplistic for these guys.
Well, yeah, it's hard. It's hard with Slayer because really, basically, what is it? There's 2 types of Slayer albums.
Yes.
There's the kind that sound like Rain and Blood and the kind that sound like South of Heaven.
Yes, essentially.
You know what I mean? Well, like, that's it.
What do you want to listen to
They had
today?
one album that was kind of like an experimental new metal sound. That
the 2
was,
albums. I would argue
maybe an album and a half. I'll give you that.
Right.
So at this
did anybody listen to Divine Intervention?
Not voluntarily, but yes.
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, I think they'd be the first to admit it's not anything memorable. It's an easy, forgettable album for me.
It doesn't suck. It's just...
No, I don't know. I'm not going to say it sucks by any means, but it's an album I can forget about. Like, I could skip right over it and not.
I feel like
give a second thought
I feel
to it.
like they wanted to do Rain and Blood again. Only they couldn't because that album already existed. And it almost just, I don't know. The songs just sound a little bit like B grade, like they were just.
Like they were hard pressed for an album. They were running out of time, and it's like, all right, well,
just threw it together.
Hey, this is what we've got. Boom, we'll go with it.
Definitely not awful by any means, but not like
It's
great.
not their Saint Anger. We'll say that.
I don't really think they have a Saint Anger.
No, I don't think so either.
Real complaint I would put on this album is you can tell this is the first album that they put out after their original drummer left.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's almost like this guy is struggling to keep up with expectations.
It's kind of like when Mortification changed drummers. Yeah.
Very similar.
Like they're playing. Like he's playing 10% over his capability.
There you go.
Like that's the best way to describe it. He can play, but it's like just 10% more than he can handle. And you can tell. You can definitely tell that he can't keep up.
They're solid when it comes to drumming, even when you drum fast. They're solid, and then there's okay, I can do it, and I kind of feel like that's what he's doing here.
I
Come on,
totally
guys,
agree.
can you play some more of those South of Heaven songs?
It's not bad.
Slow it down.
Yeah, slow
but
it down, guys.
if I had to pick a reason why I don't like it, that would be it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't dislike it. It's just not, in comparison to what came before it, it's just,
Yeah, it's
just kind of standard, regular.
It's
Slayer
another Slayer album,
right? Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
and I think at this point they had kind of started becoming a little bit more stagnant because the next album they put out was just a whole bunch of cover songs from a whole bunch of like crossover hardcore thrash bands.
Is that Undisputed Attitude?
Yeah, I don't even really want to talk about that one because it's not like
it's
their
a cover.
material.
Yeah, it'd be like covering Garage Inc. or something.
Yeah, if we didn't talk
Metallica,
about Garage Inc., we're not going to talk about Undisputed Attitude.
Yeah, so Diabolus Musica would be
Diabolus Musica. Yeah, so that record. So, this one's different.
I love this. This is the first one out of, and when you look at their stuff online, that this is listed in a new metal category as well as thrash metal.
Right. Well, those two don't exist.
Exactly.
I know 500 people.
Yeah.
I know 500 people that live in their mom's basement that would come cut your throat.
That's
for
right.
That,
That's right.
I would never call Slayer new metal. Even
I don't.
this.
I wouldn't either. But yeah, this is the close to it they've ever.
I don't know, man.
From their own.
I don't know, man. It's pretty close.
Is this Cold Chamber?
No, Cold Chamber's Cold Chamber's much heavier than this.
Mm-hmm.
But
I wonder what those guys are doing.
Wow.
You heard
He
of the
just
band,
said that.
You ever heard of the band Devil Driver?
Yeah.
The lead singer of Cold Chamber is the lead singer of Devil Driver.
Is he?
Yeah, they're heavy-ish, but not. I don't think they're as heavy as. I don't think anybody's as heavy as Cold Chamber.
I miss those guys.
They're pretty cool.
Anyway,
sorry,
sorry. Flashback.
little unfocused here. So, but anyway, basically they just wanted to be more modern. They put out Divine Intervention in '94. Undisputed Attitude, 96, not even original material. I think there's kind of this idea of, I feel like if they'd put out another album that sounded like Divine Intervention, I think they just would have plummeted. I think that would have been it.
Yeah, it might have been the downfall.
To do the same thing that many times in a row.
This is probably the album for the new drummer to be able to keep up. That's why they had to slow down.
Right, maybe. They incorporated a lot of different styles into this. Songs are more like songs. They leave the thrash in there. They're still. It's more like a new metal record with thrash parts thrown into it.
A thrash background.
Right. It's almost like they get so far into the left field in places that they're like, wait a minute, we're Slayer.
I know.
Aren't we supposed to be? It sounds disjointed creatively.
It's definitely down in the dumps as far as like, okay, this is what you do when you're in Drop D for the first time.
Yeah, like wow.
And it's not bad. It's Slayer.
Yeah, it's
not great, but it's not bad.
What do you want me to say?
It's
Slayer.
Yeah, it's a thing that exists. In no way am I saying that this record is bad. It just sounds disjointed. I don't think it's necessarily consistent with the quality of product that we'd had before either. I just feel like there's a little bit of like angsty attitude on this that really wasn't present on the old Slayer. I mean, Slayer's always been angry, but this sounds more like we're trying to be angry like Soulfly or angry like Korn or like that sort of stuff.
Well, and so what year would this have been? 98?
98, I believe, yeah.
So that would have been when... Let's see. That Follow the Leader would have been that
right
year?
around Freak on a Leash.
Time.
Yeah. So I understand that trying to stay relevant. I mean, look at what's going on at the time. You have Korn is out, like you said, Soulfly. I mean, a lot of these bands were really hitting the scene at this hard.
Yeah.
I mean, you get Limp Bizkit. I mean, you had all these bands out there that were popular, and that's what record companies were snatching up. Were bands like this. So I mean.
Yeah, I mean, if you just listen to the vocal delivery, it's different than what we'd had before. And
it's like they're trying to stay relevant. They're trying too hard to stay relevant here. And instead of just being Slayer, they're going outside the Slayer box, per se.
Right. Well, and they did it twice, too.
Yeah, God Hates Us All was kind of the same way.
God Hates Us All is the exact same way. There's a song on God Hates Us All. I think it's called Threshold.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Listen to that song. It sounds like Mudvayne featuring Slayer.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's This one I almost think is
Tuned
more
down so much.
I think this one actually sounds more like nu metal than the last one did.
I gotta agree with that.
Yeah, I can see it.
In the grand scheme,
Like they both sound like new metal, but
it's weird though because it's not something that bothers me. It's still Slayer. It's just
His vocal delivery here really bothers me.
really.
well, he's like punching it so much. It's really his delivery's awkward.
It's almost
like it doesn't
dare
fit.
I say rappy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
I am not accusing Slayer of rapping.
But again, look at the music that's out. I mean,
no, I know, man.
So I think that's just a product of the time, where the music is heading in that. So I mean,
Yeah, we're definitely getting rappy here.
Just listen.
I mean,
no, I can hear it.
Yeah,
I think they're just unfortunate. It's just a product of their time and trying to stay relevant.
Yeah, no, you're right, and it's not necessarily.
Is this Slayer featuring Fred Durst?
Yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, it's just not,
like it doesn't bother me because I listened to nu metal back in the day,
Yeah.
and I didn't really have much of a problem with it. Some stuff I go back and I listen to, and I'm like, oh yeah, but like for the most part, I mean, that genre is not without merit, and at this point, Slayer is part of it. At this particular year, this particular moment in time,
I guess to me, it's just another album. Like it's not anything noteworthy to me.
so can I jump ahead to Christ Illusion then?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right, so here we are. It's 2006. The last thing you got was about 5 years prior.
Got a bunch of re-releases.
I was gonna say
before
they finally took some time off in between albums. Reset, at least try to.
Also, the return of Dave Lombardo.
Yeah, they brought him back.
Yep.
Smart move.
And
listen to the difference.
And we're back.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, wow. All right.
You get a fade
The
in,
beast,
and then
the beast that has
bam.
been sleeping has now been awakened,
I mean, what do you want to say? Here it is. Slayer's back.
Interesting story about Christ Illusion. Now, I don't remember the exact day Christ Illusion came out, but interesting story when
June 6th,
yeah,
2006.
When Joe and I and Buddy and we went up to we went to Allentown, Pennsylvania to record our album, and the record label owner, not somebody that I would ever describe as religious. He was a huge metalhead, Most of the other bands on the label were like death metal bands and just like weird stoner grunge type bands. And the thing I thought was really interesting was he was showing me Christ Illusion. And he was like, dude, I'm actually really offended by this album.
Well, look at the album cover. That's enough. There's enough to...
Right, yeah. It's pretty intense. I mean, I kind of just shrugged it off. I was like, that's just Slayer being Slayer,
Well, yeah. I mean...
Which is all it was. But yeah, this is, I mean, we're back to the old Slayer here.
You head in that direction, that's for damn sure.
I could sit there and argue about how individual songs aren't as good as individual songs on Rain and Blood. But, we're just, we're digressing.
I personally like the next album more than this one, but...
World Painted Blood, yeah, that was a good one.
To me, that was finally like, yes, a return to just Slayer being that Slayer formula that we've been talking so much about.
So, so Christ Illusion is Hell Awaits, and World Painted Blood is Rain and Blood. Yeah.
Yep.
I think I spent more time this week listening to this record than any other. Just because it was fun to put on, and when it was over, it was like, okay,
yeah,
I got some Slayer in me.
It's a fast Slayer album, It's like
right.
It's so fast that it clocks in at under 40 minutes.
I know, it's crazy.
which blows my mind.
You should listen to some of the hardcore punk records I have.
Oh man, well,
14 songs, 19 minutes.
I was gonna say like a minute and a half a piece.
Yeah, barely anything. But yeah, World Painted Blood I thought was a really good step in the right direction for Slayer. I mean, at this point, we've kind of abandoned trying to sound modern. And it's a good move, too, because, I mean, kind of in a way, thrash metal kind of came back in recent years, more so than it had been before. Bands like Testament and stuff are like playing Exodus, or, they're back and they're playing. And I don't know if they ever went anywhere or not, but we'll talk about that on different weeks. But, basically, it really, the paycheck of thrash, really kind of cashed in recent years, and people want to hear a good thrash album.
Yeah, who doesn't?
And Slayer is there now, consistently giving it to us.
So would you rate this as the best of the most recent 3?
To me, yeah. Well, yeah, I haven't finished listening to all of the last album that came out in 2015, and I like what I hear, but I think so far, for me, this album would be the best of the newer.
Repentless is almost as good as World Painted Blood.
So far, it's about a step behind to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's still really good, and again, this band is putting out a consistent product, so like, don't let anything negative we're saying affect your decision making. In the sense that like, you buy any of the last 3 albums and you're going to enjoy it from beginning to end.
This isn't like I said with Metallica, where there's any
there's no weird jarring
or stuff like that. It's nothing's like, man, I just know like all their stuff is pretty consistent. It's pretty good for the most part. You're not really. I mean, you're gonna have songs that you're obviously not going to be into.
Right.
Some stuff that sounds weird, but for the most part, yeah, you could if you had to buy their whole collection, you would be satisfied with their entire collection.
Oh, absolutely, and I have
from start to finish.
Yeah.
So I mean, for sure.
Yeah, I have.
Don't let that discourage you for not checking them out.
I've actually been going back and trying to recollect the old albums on vinyl, which is really tough.
Like you'll notice a difference on their new album, even because Jeff Hanneman passed away in I think 2013.
Yeah,
something like that. So I mean, you'll notice a difference in some of the riffs, but
right.
And I think Lombardo was out of the band again.
Yeah, he left.
So
I don't think was he on World Painted Red or World Painted Blood?
Yes, he was. That was the last one. I think he was out after that again.
World Painted Blood.
There's kind of a situation going on where
Mortification has an album called Blood World, and I made a comment during that podcast that it was the same lyrics in different order.
Yep,
it's really interesting.
Pretty spot on analogy.
Kind of the issue with Dave Lombardo is he doesn't feel like he's getting credit for his writing. So it kind of started this argument for all bands of who owns the song, who wrote the song.
Right.
This sounds like something.
Did the guitarist write the song?
Right.
The drummer sits there, and he's not getting credit for his parts that he wrote, even though you would argue it's a drum set.
Right.
It's not really notes on a sheet, but that's a discussion for a different day.
Oh, is it?
But that's just one of those.
They didn't see eye to eye, and he was out.
There it is.
I mean, essentially, it was it. Which is a shame, too, because he's a hell of a drummer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like as we noticed before, you can tell with the other guy they had that he was just couldn't quite cut it.
He was just there. He got better, though.
Yeah, but he was no Lombardo. I mean, he couldn't keep up. Their style had to conform to him rather than sticking to where they're at, which, it is what it is.
I mean, I do feel like the new albums aren't as energetic as the old albums are.
Well, when you're 100 years old, Dan, it's kind of hard to keep that.
That's just what I was gonna say. Like, I mean, the fact that they're still playing on this level.
I know. With the 2 of the original members not being there anymore. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, so it definitely makes sense. I think Slayer for me is a band that they're not my favorite band by any means. And I was telling Josh on the way over here that it's not really, they're not really favorite band material, at least not for me, because yes, whenever I buy a Slayer record, I do have the relief of knowing that I just bought a good thrash record. Something I'm not going to be disappointed with. However, I can't just sit there and listen to Slayer like all day like I can other bands, and like Joe was saying, you really can't just shuffle it.
No. You got to be in the mood to listen to Slayer. Like, you know what? I want to just listen to something heavy aggression in your face. And sure, pick out an album from them and go. Like, okay, I got my fill. I've been smacked around enough. I'm good.
But the impact for Slayer, I think Slayer really opened the door for a lot of bands. Slayer's impact is undeniable in the sense that I feel like in a lot of ways they really paved the way for death metal. And people
see that.
People that I would say are maybe a little less educated, because I don't think Slayer really has ever done anything more extreme than thrash metal. I have heard people describe it as a death metal band, but that's definitely not.
No, I wouldn't.
In my opinion, it's not quite there. But they definitely opened the door for this kind of like faster, more extreme, pushing the limit kind of thing. Because Metallica is notable for bringing thrash metal to the masses.
Commercially,
but they kind of
Metallica. They changed. They went from thrash metal to metal. I mean, what would you call them? I don't
hard
think
rock.
Yeah, I mean, by Puppets, they weren't thrash anymore. I mean,
not really. No,
I mean, even half of Ride the Lightning, they weren't thrash. I mean, yeah, they were no longer thrash. I mean, where Slayer has pretty much been
always thrash
through their whole career, minus those 2 albums we discussed where it was new metal-ish, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, I mean, they're pretty consistent with what their style is.
Right. I mean, and I think also paving the way for heavier bands too. The idea of let's not hold back.
Yeah.
Let's not be afraid to be a wall of noise at times. I mean, it's like Slayer, not really known for their notable solos. You know, like I enjoy every Slayer solo I hear while I'm hearing it, and then when it's over, it's over.
Which
and I don't think about it again.
He is actually he can write really great solos.
Oh, yeah.
He just chooses what fits for the song, and that's just, screeching cats coming from hell.
Right. I mean, when the rest of the song, when the rest of the song is firmly planted in hell.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to go along with that screeching sound.
But they definitely they influenced so many bands, and just the imagery too. Like paving the way for more morbid type lyrics and stuff. I mean, because I feel like bands didn't really talk about really dark subjects. I mean, they did.
They had a song about the Holocaust, for God's sakes.
Right. I mean, they did talk about dark subject matter, and I do think the Slayer's lyrics over the years kind of reached a point of self-parody.
Sure.
After a while, but I think the initial shock of Slayer and some of the things that they had to say, they definitely paved the way for bands like Cannibal Corpse and
Cannibal Corpse.
Just that type of extremity that just is just unrelenting. And you could say, well, at this point, you can kind of say, well, I know everybody thinks heavy metal is super evil and dark and everything, and it is to an extent. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is that they sold it as entertainment. Hey, do you like horror movies? Do you like slasher movies? Well, you're going to like this band because that's the kind of stuff that they talk about.
They don't take that home with them. That's not something they practice.
Right. Well, yeah, and there are some bands that did. But
we'll leave that alone.
Yeah. We'll reach that as we reach the bands.
No touchy.
So,
right.
It didn't take as long as you might have expected, but final thoughts on Slayer?
Slayer, man. Phenomenal band. I think they're going to be around for a while.
Yeah.
I don't see Slayer going away anytime soon.
Expect more of the same.
Yeah, expect more of the same.
They are who we thought they were. I mean,
right. Yeah.
There's not a whole lot to say about Slayer, and that hasn't been said. I mean, they are who you think they are.
Well, and it makes sense too that the Slayer podcast is going to be about the length of a Slayer album.
Yeah, I mean, and not much is left to say.
The only thing I have to say about them is if you're a guitarist, if you're a bassist, if you're a vocalist, if you're a drummer, try to keep up.
Ooh, good luck.
And good luck indeed. You have an album of the week, Dan?
Yeah, actually not. It's I guess because I've been listening to so much Slayer, I kind of went as far away from that as possible. I've been listening to this band from the 80s called Grim Reaper. And they have an album out called...
sounds familiar.
Yeah, they have an album out called... that came out in the 80s called Rock You to Hell. And it sounds like an Iron Maiden, Judas Priest kind of band, and I've really been enjoying that.
I'm actually going to keep a theme here. Speaking of Dave Lombardo, the Finnish cello metal band Apocalyptica, their 4th album, Reflections, feature drums by Dave Lombardo. And I'm going to throw that out. Everybody needs to listen to that. What about you, Josh?
I've been listening to Metallica too much lately. I haven't listened to anything new in a while. I mean, I'm still listening to Hardwire.
You listen to Hardwire still?
Yeah.
All right, everybody go back and listen to it again.
I know.
I don't have a problem with it.
I just got my tickets for the show, so that's what I've been jamming to lately. I know.
And on that note, this is going to be episode 4 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for joining, and we will see you next week.
Metal.